The first,
Excuse me.
oh, sorry.
Okay.
The first approach what I have the Afro-Cuban religion was through my mother. And that happened when I was still an art student. I always have the feeling and the approach to this kind of tribal material, not only African, also Native American, Oceanic. I like all those things. I have the same kind of, ¿cómo se dice inquietud? Well,
Interest
in this kind of culture, but I don't, in those years I was too young, I don't totally focalize on those things completely. I have like a 17-year-old. And then my mother took me to the house of the guy who later on went to be my godfather. He took me there because she, like many other Cuban women, go to those places once in a while to solve problems, spiritual problems. And she met that man, my godfather, Alberto Ecochea, and she came to me so excited. Oh, I met this guy, and he told me many things about you, about things what you had to do. And it's very important because I had to bring you there. So I established a relation with that guy from 1976. And he told me that I had to be initiated in the Kongo tradition. And I said, okay, I'm ready to do that. And he said, no, you need a specific training for that. And you're required to walk a long way to deserve to be initiated in the thing. So he put me certain conditions to require certain materials, certain things what I had to do. And this took me from 1976 to 83. By 1983, I already was a well-known, recognized artist in Cuba, but no matter what, the Cuban government sent me to Angola. So that was some kind of traumatic experience for me because I don't want to be linked with the army. In fact, I was making a lot of things to don't try to get there. Mm-hmm. But in Cuba, though, it is impossible to refute that kind of things. I already was married that time. I have my son who was a baby in that time. And I know if I say no, I'm going to dumping a big problem in my family. So finally I said at the end, I accepted to go voluntarily. In those years, they say that. But my godfather encouraged me to say, you know what? I know you feel afraid and you don't like to go there as a soldier and all that, but it's something that's going to be very important to you. And I command you to go there and bring to me everything what you found there. So he was so excited about the idea that I'm going to crossing the ocean to the motherland. And he said, take every branch, every stone, every piece of earth, every fragment of the animal, bring it to me because this is a powerful thing. And we want to be stronger with that. So this, in some way, the spirit was like that. So he protected me. He gave me a protection, extra protection to go there. And I was there in a traumatic experience because I don't want to be a soldier, but I try to behave the best if possible as a human being, respecting the people around. Thing that many of the other partners where I have there, they don't do. This is something besides. I don't want to talk about that there now. But I have the experience there. I have, in some way, was a imperfect field, my first imperfect field work in Africa. So I tried to correct this with the years. And I established like a methodology of work to go to the place, meet the community, establish a relation, go for more than one time to the same place. This is the other thing. And with that thing, come back and produce my own work. This is what I do until now. I also do that in Peru, in the Amazonas. I also do that in Mexico, in northern Mexico mostly, and also do that in northern Thailand and Laos. I also do that with the Native American people here between Wyoming, South Dakota, and Montana. I looking for certain things who teach me something, and it beyond the, no matter if I am an artist, beyond the formal characteristic of the thing. There is a knowledge there, and there is also a beauty attached to that knowledge. It's an aesthetic thing, altogether interrelated. Mm-hmm. The philosophical level, the religious level, and also artistic and and quality level of those things. So I try to be involved with the thing and try to learn as more as possible, And this is what I do now. My last trip to the 2 trips that I attend to Mali, Burkina, developed me in a whole different area where I never was totally involved, like West Africa. I always was more concentrating in Central Africa, but this time I was there, and I feel so satisfied to take that chance and to meet those people and to see the culture still alive. See, because some of the people, some scholars who, when I mention my intention to go, they say, no, it's nothing there anymore. Everybody's Muslim, and they don't care about the thing. It's not like that. It never is ending, nothing. The thing is transformed in a different level. Some people don't understand that, and they try to cancellate the idea that the culture is still moving on and create new forms. And depending on the moment when you have the approach to that culture, you're going to see just that particular aspect. But eventually, this thing is going to continue, and nothing totally disappear. And this is what I love on those things, to recognize the capacity, the creativity capacity of the people, and the spirituality what they have. And I consider myself like lucky to be there, no matter the condition what they have now, because, for example, Burkina and Mali, now they are involved in certain kind of jihadist movement, and almost like it's not exactly a civil war, but it's almost there, between the confrontation between certain groups to the other, and it's not completely safe. But I take a risk, and I like to go there. Actually, I'm planning another trip now to this coming October. So for me, this is what enriched my work. It's more than some, I don't know if I had to identify me in a different way, but many artists from my generation, they want to go to the Bienal of Venice or the Bienal of Sao Paulo. I like to go to Africa. For me, this is something what is no comparison. It's completely a different thing, And the attitude is completely, and the product is also completely different. And this is what I try to do.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, maybe just in our interest for time, maybe other students could just take a turn introducing their work and raising a question. And I hope, Dagenhart, we can get back to you. But are there others? Yeah, Amira, please.
Well, first of all, I'm really glad to be part of this conversation today. Thank you so much, Jose and Bárbaro, for the amazing and wonderful presentation and work that you're doing. My name is Amira Hasnawi. I'm a 4th-year PhD in the Department of World Arts and Culture / Dance. And briefly, I am Tunisian, and I am doing my research on the trans-healing music practices of 2 main communities, one in the capital, Tunis, and the other one in the south, Tozeur. And I'm looking at how practitioners of trans-healing music navigate their healing practices according to shifting socioeconomic and cultural transformation since the 2011 revolution in Tunisia. A lot of my work deals with religion, cultural religion, and material culture with the aspect of healing, but also even the instruments themselves. And it is just so fascinating. It has become very fascinating to me to think and reimagine in museums and exhibitions of beings. And by the way, Jose, I want to acknowledge the beings behind you. I call them beings. They're not human beings, but I want to call them beings. Because I do believe they have, and that's one of the many things we talked about throughout our seminar with Alan and Ellen and everybody else, is the objects have their own agency and they hold their own ontologies and epistemologies. So I'm really thinking what it means to work with one's own community, and to also navigate those multiple identities of being an artist, intellectual, but also work with those communities who might not be affiliated with what we do as scholars. And I'm really interested in sacristy, and sacristy being presented in museums. And I was reminded through some of the images, Jose, of the Kesheke and the Mbourie, through the work of my late advisor and co-chair, Polly Roberts. And I kept thinking through all of that. And my question would be, what are you and Barbaro's perception on presenting sacredcies in a way that doesn't take away from their secrets, if the community doesn't want these secrets to be spelled, but also we do want the museum spaces or exhibitions to be a place of knowledge, to be a place of passing and sharing ontologies and epistemologies without taking away from that. So how do we balance that? But also, as people involved with their own communities, how do we make sure that also we're not othering our own selves and cultures in those spaces? I'm really grappling with some of these ideas when it comes to exhibitions, and thank you again.
You're welcome. Bárbaro.
No, I was writing down the thank you for the question, Amira. I think there are two ways of, I will kind of answer that concern. I think it's that had to do with what that means secret in the context of the museum, what that means secret in the context of the discipline that been doing those kind of research, anthropology first, and later African art history. And I think it's when you have a word that implies certain kind of transgressions or imply a kind of ethical behavior in behalf of the holder of that culture, is when the term secret become problematic in the context of the museum, because it somehow look like we are so seeking for unveil something that is prohibited to us, that we should not have. And I think that is kind of the rationale behind that. I think it's the context of how the disciplines and how the museums or institution understand the term secret. But the other part is that had to do more with real people in real time and the real culture. And I think we should maybe try to understand what are the processes that are in place and the vocabulary they use to define certain kind of information and access to information and knowledge that require a level of initiation or participation that is different from a ceremony that is open to everyone, that become a patrimony of a group of people. Those kind of ceremonies, they are holistic and they play the role to glue and allow, they are more memory activators. They are very different from other kind of practices that require a level of participation and intimacy and knowledge into and time. And I think it's in somehow we fell into explain these two spaces, and then sometimes we see ourselves as people that wanted to translate that process. We wanted to bridge, out this misunderstanding without fixing the problem to begin with from both sides. That would be. I remember my godfather told me always, there is no secret. The secret is in your mind. There is no such a thing as secret. The secret is you. Is in you. And one of the things I encounter in middle of the 19th century, George Grenfell was the founder of a Baptist church he created the first Baptist church in Mbanza, Kongo in around 1864. And pretty much like 3 generations of Grenfell, and the last one who retired from the church, he served in Angola until 2010, his grandson. And when they can see the Baptist church have this newsletter that is focusing and try to demonize the practices they encounter in many different, and they share this newsletter everywhere. But when the Grenfell, the grandson, retired, he donated pretty much all his writing to one of the college here at Oxford. And I realized looking into his donations, his father did exactly the same thing, and his grandfather. And they decide to have a 2 different kind of approach to the local practice. One based in secrecy and rejection of traditions, that have been broadcast to the newsletter. But the second one, they decided to write books about the local religion, like Lemba Society and Dembo Society, 3 over generations. But they never shared those information with the church until they retire or until they die. And you have a Zen person in one hand that have a very aggressive language that defines, the Kongo religion, specifically in Bansa Congo. And the same person at the same time is writing another text that is, they could try to do completely the opposite. One of the other thing is the Capuchin mission in Mbanza Congo, they've been for more than 500 years. From day one, 500 years ago, they designated a priest to study the local religion until today. And those writings, they are shared by the Capuchin mission, by the friars, until today. And most of the people, they don't know that. Why a priest who wanted to dedicate an interview of someone, most of them, they always select someone who comes from that traditions. And so going back to this question about what is secret and what is not, depending on the spaces and when this knowledge is produced, and it change pretty much the what that means, that words in the context of what you wanted to do, and the meanings that carry on. But secrecy is the word that, when the exhibition that was at the Met Congo was around secrecy, the Congo across the water is, I think that word is very, very important, and to highlight the distinction between this particular practice and how we understand that particular practice. And that doesn't help fellow anthropologists also, like someone like McGuffey, that promotes this idea without understanding the context. And I think that is what that could answer you.
Thank you.
Yeah, interesting. Any of the other students wish to provide a question or kind of introduce their own work? It's not, you don't have to, but if you want to, this is a time we've set for this.
I can speak.
Please, Laurel, yeah.
Yeah, my name's Laurel, and I'm actually tuning in from Montana. Jose, I heard you mention Montana, and I'm going to be going to South Dakota next month for a Sundance ceremony. So,
really?
Yeah, so it's interesting to
wait, to Rosebud or to Pine Ridge?
Yankton, down by Marty.
Oh, I see.
But I'm constantly drawing these parallels between the ceremonies that I know here in North America, and then, crossing over the Atlantic, and our discussions are rooted in Africa, and just always drawing these parallels between everything from the medicine bundles to the formation of different ceremonies, the secrecy and all these things. But I guess I haven't formulated an in-depth question, but one thing that I was thinking about is, even with the basic parameters of an minkisi, for instance, when we're placing it in the museum context and bringing up these questions around activation and things like that, I feel like myself, who isn't well steeped in that particular realm, there's kind of like a sterilization that's happened for me just in my own understanding. And I was curious if either of you could just kind of speak to the minkisi and, just in a broader sense of it, and then the mpungu and how, what that correlation looks like. Because I heard Bárbaro, you mentioning, the two, and, how that crosses over.
Question, this is something what you do more than one time, or this is the first time where you went to go to the Sundance?
I'm a Sundancer.
Oh, okay.
And I've been dancing in Carberry in Manitoba.
Oh, I see.
10 years.
Nice. Wow.
but now the borders are closed down. So
I know. But, yeah. No, this is amazing that you know, not many people know this thing, because this is actually, it's the parallel what they happen in Africa. This is what's still happening inside the heart of the Native American communities. This is something very private, but still the culture is alive. And this is the most important ceremony of the year, the sun dance, when they went to make their own sacrifice and all those things. And the bundle what you mentioned is the perfect parallel with Inkisi. It's exactly the same connotation, the same meaning. It's the idea to have, how I can say that, like a microcosm in one thing. You take a little pieces of everything and put it together in a container. Actually, the first Inkisis who arrived in Cuba was like a bundle, like they call it womba, was a piece of cloth or a piece of leather of animal hide with many ingredients inside, and they fold it and tie it up on top. The bundle is something like that. It's a package. It's things contained in a bag, in a leather bag. In many cases, it's quite similar. The first guy who talked about the similarity, the amazing similarity of the religious concept of the microcosm, was a German guy, a German anthropologist. I can't remember the name now, but I can find it for you. He was the first guy who was in the 1880s who mentioned the big parallels between the plain Indian religion, specifically the whole manipulation of the bundle, and the Kongo tradition. Of course, they don't know each other. It's just a coincidence. It's a religious coincidence across the, beside the distance, you know. But it's something very important what you pointed at. But for me, you know, like Bárbaro says, many aspects of that. The first approach was the people who collect the material and to put it in a museum was to recognize the artistic value of those things. The first thing, the first level of the problem is to recognize the artistic value of the thing. Besides that, they have any other connotation, religious connotation and energy, whether still spell it out or not, because some of the thing was mutilated, if we can say, or transformed in order to give it up. You know, many of those things don't work anymore like that. As Bárbaro say, certain of these objects require to be fitted once in a while in order to keep it alive. So eventually the energy move away, or it can be back again, only if they added something. But this is something what they don't have in a museum anymore. So now the basic thing of the thing is that those objects fill around in museum because it's artistic product or different cultures. And I don't think that we have to be, you know, some kind of people have some kind of idea of feeling guilty to have the thing. I don't feel like that. I think it's something very valuable that people have to show and share with others. But at the end, the ultimate secret, nobody going to have it. Because it's like I can say, I don't know how to drive a plane. And maybe you give me a Cessna now, a little small plane, and give me even the key to drive the Cessna, I'm going to have a crash. No matter you have this thing in front of me, I'm going to be able to manipulate. I have no right to do that. I require training. I require certain songs, certain ceremonies required to be initiated in certain level. And even inside those societies, they have different levels. So it's nothing what is going to be in danger. It's nothing going to be in danger for if we have the thing in museums. In fact, for me, it's important the things put it in public to spread out the value of those cultures, because behind those objects, behind of any of those objects, is the effort of the guy who was there in the 19th or the 18th century, looking the thing in the bush and put it back to here. If we know about those cultures, because those guys were there before. So we have to pay respect for that effort too. You know, so it's so simple now. I saw this kind of new movement, what I can qualify like a new kind of paternalism. Oh, we have to return this to the main owner, but it's not like that. It's a communal heritage, you know? And also the condition in the place is not the most accurate, you know? You return something now to the places where I've been in Mali and Burkina now, they're going to be destroyed, unfortunately. They're going to be destroyed completely, or they're going to be put on sale again, because they create a different kind of value around those things. So it's too delicate. It's not so simple. You know, this kind of idea to a religious object who have a aesthetic quality, supposed to be carried with some kind of energy, and we have to show it or not. Nothing going to be missing or damaged or disrespect, in my own opinion. This is what I think.
I just have to interject, because I worked in a museum that's a you know, a old venerable institution. You know, it started being built in 1901, was finished in 1923. This is the Brooklyn Museum in New York. Collected extensively both Native America and African materials, but in one case, you know, the Native American, for example, medicine bundles, you know, they came into the museum, but the idea was very much to really take it apart and look at exactly what's inside. And we have these records, you know, I mean, I looked at these records, you know, from the 1930s, where not only did a Navajo Diné medicine bundle come in, but it was opened up. It was completely, that leather bundle was unpacked. All the contents were laid out, and the museum tradition was to believe that they would further understand it. They would understand it better and interpret it better if they could see all of those contents. Now, I feel, unlike what Jose has been saying and what Bárbaro has been saying, which is to collect these things with an attitude of incredible respect and to maintain them with an attitude of respect, we have this unfortunate past where that level of respect has not always been taken on board. You know, that the notion of trying to understand the community that created this material and the way in which it was of value and use for them, which both of you have been really talking about, the context, you know, the Grenfell writing, documenting one context, but, you know, creating pamphlets for another context. These kinds of self-conscious understanding and respect has not always been the case. So I agree also, I like museums. I think museums play a really important role, but I also think there's been an important set of transitions within museums. But I will leave it at that for Laurel's important questions. Yeah.
What I can, Laurel, for your question about the Minkisi and Kongo, is a very tricky object, because the problem what I see with all museum, the label is Minkisi and Kongo. We don't, and Minkisi and Kongo means notating. It's like, also refers to the nails, or when you have something that tie up to. It's a mnemonic thing that allow the priest to know the activity that is related to the object, how many people they meet, how many problems they solve, how many, you know, what type of medicines is on displays on the surface of. And Minkisi and Kongo is just the kind of generic name that tell you that object that has the ability to notate or record history on events. But in somehow we cannot define. I think we have to do a better job to try to get the full name of the object. And then only to understand the full name of the object, you will understand the implication of that object in a particular cultural framework. Because everyone, you know, you go to the Met, all of the Minkisi that have nailed, the name is Minkisi and Kongo everywhere. How could it be? And this is why we've been, you know, before it used to be fetish, we use one generic term and we replace by another generic, because sound African, Minkisi and Kongo. Now, but that is one thing. The other thing is the object, that the life of an object in or outside the context of the museum. An mpungu or nkisi or a prenda or nganga, they had to be humid. Humidity defined the basic functionality of that object, the chemical reaction that take place in there. An nkisi or an mpungu that is dry, that means it's not working, that doesn't have the ability, that doesn't have agency. You need to have something that allow this object to come alive, to create that chemical reaction inside the object. By alcohol, perfumes, and other different type of drinks, but there is the object is alive because that medicine has to come into what they call in Kikongo minienia. It's like radiation. Is the proper translation of that word? The radiation that come into place by interacting different ingredient. But there are other type of nkisi that they don't have medicine inside. What is the action into the client is through their beauty, into the shape of the object, by looking at the object. But we haven't even, this is like we're scratching the surface when in relation to how does object function. One, they have a more visual element, static in a way, and the other one is the actual medicine that take place inside the object. I think what the fascinating thing to me, when McGuffey tried to make a notation to all of the nkisi being recorded by Laman in the 19th century, and those recording took place by Mukongo, Bakongo people who used to be baptized and rejected the religion in the first place, the 21 people who used to work for them. But anyway, what Laman tried to do is to try to understand how the nkisi, the logic of nkisi, in order to have a more effective conversion to the in the particular, and he managed to create 21 churches in place. But the Baptist church, Laman was part of the Baptist church. In 1930, they did a big burn, and they burned 5,000 objects. And in 19, they did every 5 years. And there are photographs of Laman that used to go and collecting, and you can see the people standing and burning those objects and what happened to people. The Baptist church was kind of fascinated in the actual object itself without understanding that was more important, the procedure, the mechanism, the logic of the object. And more they burn, more the people made. This is in the record in the church. That's what I kind of answer back into. What we need to understand is what is the mindset that allowed someone to empower a traditional object like look from the 19th century as Laman, collected by Laman, or the one I showed today. And I think that is the could be the way to go forward. And even one of the Laman did, he wrote 98 notebooks in Kikongo. And the funny thing is that McGuffey and Jansen, they think they are the only two people can read that. And as a matter of fact, they are the only two people that made a specific reference to those notebook. And what I did is I wanted to read it. I wanted to figure it out. If they are missing something or I'm missing something, I want to go back to the sources of not just the notebook written by Laman originally in Kikongo. I wanted to understand the context of the Baptist Church dealing with the religions that the things they did is unthinkable at the time. But that doesn't change because the tradition is still alive regardless, despite all of the effort to try to eradicate those traditions. And it's also the other thing. There is a distinction between Nkisi, Mpungu, and Kangi Kidito. This is not the time to, but eventually, art asked me to do it. But there is a subtle difference in the methodology of the object itself. And that is what, and also important, the words, what that means in relation to the object. That is what I insist in the proficiency of the language, because it allows you to understand a different kind of universe. And the object articulate other meanings that are carried on through the proper name, not to the one we feel comfortable repeating over and over.
Interesting.
Segue to my question. So, hi everyone, my name is Brisa. I am a third-year PhD in the World Arts and Cultures Department, and my research looks at African and Indigenous knowledge systems and the opportunities that they can bring to our critique or investigation of museological practices and strategies. And so my case studies are in Brazil and Mexico. I'm Afro-Mexican myself, so there's just that added cultural affinity that I have for my community. And so a question or something that you said, Professor Martinez-Ruiz, is that when you're approaching languages instead of translation, going to a shift. And I'm really interested in hearing a little bit more about that methodological approach, as I'm also not necessarily invested in translating or making things, forming things into what can be consumable for Eurocentric peoples or people not familiar with the language, but really entering into these new worlds and spaces. And so just hearing a little bit more about that process or the ways that you're approaching that shift would be really helpful for me.
I think language is vital. When I went to back into Angola as a PhD student in 1999, my supervisor, Robert Farris Thompson, he gave me the Bible in Kikongo, and I was kind of learning Kikongo from 19th century translation from the Baptist Church, by the way. And when I landed, in Liberia, we know a lot of vocabulary from Congo languages and related languages, but we couldn't really have a proper understanding of the logic of a language until you have a proper training on, learning on the language. And I landed in Planet Mbanza, Congo, and I started to speak in my Kikongo from the 19th century, and the people started laughing on my face. But because I wanted to learn, I didn't care. I tried and tried until, and I asked the person who wanted to be my wanted to assist me in the whole process, to be my teacher. And I started going recording, I started writing, and I took that very, very personal, and started translating. But the problem I have, I just finished a book I submitted to the Mexico College, and later will be published in University of Texas Tech. And I've been recording proverbs and songs for more than 25 years, doing research. And I couldn't do a sanitized translation of the proverbs and the story into English without contextualizing a different kind of stories that are important for practitioners of the Congo, practitioning in Cuba. For example, the story of Mambe, what they call the person who sacrificed, a beautiful story of a young person who sacrificed to use his body part to be part of the first minkisi. And it's a long story that highlight important, it's an ethic dilemma and a moral lesson but when you go into the story of Mambe, that resonates with most of the Congo practitioners in Cuba, and I try to understand what is the story, what is the counterpart of Mambe in the Congo. And Foucault in 1967 wrote this beautiful, with John Jansen, a very important anthropologist, about Muhungu, was also the idea of a sacrifice is underlined to a story. But what couldn't understand, I have a problem with Muhungu is not a word in Kikongo. That age, it doesn't exist in Kikongo. Why a well-known Congolese priest and linguistic is proposing the history, the myth of a Congo religion back in Central Africa based in the name that doesn't have to do with, it doesn't sound Kikongo. And so I kind of doing a little bit more digging. It does it in the process of the translation. And muhungu or hungu, the verb that for that particular word is wanga. That means like the winds, like the wind from the hurricane that can destroy, but at the same time could be gentle. That is the meanings of that word. And that had to do with the first character also who decided to sacrifice himself for the future of practice. I think the only way I can do the translation is by having these multi-layered conversations, not just in their own tradition, in the context of the Bakongo people and their own history, and then the other neighbor, culture, related culture. Also, how this conversation took place in the context of the diaspora across the Atlantic, and I try to find the differences and the similarities in that process, but always going back to the proficiency in the languages. I think is paramount. In my it's something I inherit from Thompson, and I know most of the people who teach African art, and they are no more than 5 teaching historic African now, maybe 5 or 6. Most of the people, they don't think it's important. They don't think it's important to know the language, any language. You know English, French, or Dutch, or Flemish. It's fine. I don't have a problem with those languages. I know those languages, but if you do field work or you come for a tradition that have a particular language, for me, you must speak that language well. You must write that language well. That is my advice for you. Bedia.
No, yes, it's fine. Good enough.
So I'm wondering whether everybody has to go right on the hour, or whether we can linger maybe for additional 10 minutes. Can we prevail on everybody if it's possible? If it's possible, it would be wonderful, just so we have enough time. I want to be sure that any student, okay, Lauren or Isabel or Bailey, I don't know whether you had any questions that you didn't get to ask. I know from the conservation point of view, I know that I'm sort of speaking in a way for Lauren and Isabel perhaps, but interestingly, both, like Lauren is now going to be doing research into camwood or tukula, and Isabel is doing research into the blue pigment that derives from laundry bluing, so a product that obviously is widely dispersed throughout Africa and has been used as a pigment. And I'm curious just to know whether either of our guests kind of have any sense of, I mean, we know there are pragmatic reasons for choosing certain materials because of availability, because of their broad distribution, all of these things, but are there other aspects that either of you as artists and scholars, any thoughts you would have about tukula, using tukula or using this particular blue? I would turn that over.
Yeah, but I don't have any of those including. I used to use tukula in some of my drawings. I used to. Yeah.
Let me see.
But I don't including that in the presentation, but maybe I can show you a couple of those quickly.
Oh, wonderful. And I guess while you're looking, Jose, why did you use tukula?
Because I found tukula on one of my trips. And it was an amazing pigment. And I use it. I try to, of course, they using mostly to put it on the body, but I use it to make a drawing with that. And what I did, that I don't paint in the traditional way. I throw the dust on the surface. Something, well, in some way very old. One of the older techniques to paint even from the Paleolithic time is to blow the ochre or from the head, or from a piece of bone, like a little spray. So I use that. Then also, once again, back in the reference to the Plain Indian also use that technique too. They make spots with red ochre in many places. Yeah. ¿Lo puedes enseñar?
It says video sharing screen is disabled.
Oh, let me quickly.
And the blue is very particular because the blue is something new for these people. They don't have that quality of blue, and it's a perfect reference to Kalunga. So I saw many maps from Congo who have even the level of Kalunga is displayed horizontally on the level of the face of the mask. Specifically, you can see that between the Yaka and Kanu and Sombo and Holo people. There is one. Do you see the drawing now or not?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I made like a view of the gazelle jumping, and you can see the jump on the air, moving from one side of the paper to the other. This is Tukula. This is exactly what we were talking about now. The title is, yes?
Jose, was it more red when you first made it? Or was it brown black?
No, it's no, well, sorry, the picture maybe not so good, but it's red. It's the deep red.
It's deep red, okay.
Yeah. It's not black.
Oh, no.
Okay.
But there is
Tukula is an antibiotic, and the women's they use during pregnancy, and it's a specific tree. It's very difficult to find in the forest, in the rainforest. When you get the powder from the tree trunk, and it's when you get that's just they use for beauties and other things. But I think it's in more during the pregnancy process that protect the women's.
Yeah.
Oof.
Unfortunately, I finished all. I had to go back and get more Tukula.
Spectacular.
I'm running out of Tukula by now. But I mean, I waste too much because there's no way that I can throw the dust and recuperate the remain on the bottom. So I waste a lot of Tukula. So
I can send it from my lab here. I can send you.
Please.
Can you send it to me also, Barbaro, for a moment?
Yes.
I would like that. We'll send you. Okay.
I didn't know that have the antibiotic quality. I didn't know that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Wonderful. Wow.
I saw an amazing piece who was a part of the headdress of the lady. It's a compressed portion of Tukula, like a block attached to the main hair on top of the hair with a particularly design. It's beautiful. It's something like a piece of brick like this.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is why you buy it in the market. Is you get it's like a piece of look like a piece of rock, like a brick.
And
I think you can powder with a knife or something when you use it. Yeah.
So interesting. Wow.
And I think is that they have if you get poison in the coffee, there is another rock that look like silver. You kind of get a powder from that particular rock, and with Tukula, and take the poison out of the person that when you drink it in the coffee. If someone poison you, that is it's just we can talk here for hours about traditional medicine, but I love it. I just the funny thing is when I was a student, I think is my first summer, there was a donor. His name was Charlie Benenson. Charlie Benenson used to own the Midlife Company in Manhattan, in 42nd Street and Lexington. And I was sent to Charlie, and also became friends later, to his house. And across the street was another donor, Walter Berais. The two donated the entire collection to Yale. And there was in the collection a 16th century crucifix made out of wood. And I asked him, talking about Ellen's, I asked Charlie, can I send the crucifix to a lab to analyze? Because I removed one of the crucifix has something unique. You need to have nails attached to it. That for me was interesting because the crucifix is an almighty representation of the power of God. It doesn't need to have any kind of improvement. And I can see an object in early Renaissance, the mindset is interpret that particular object as an incomplete device. It had to be improved, there had to be help in somehow. No? That was the kind of thing that came to me while looking at the and I asked him, can I send it to, because I removed one of them and I saw something inside, but I couldn't really have a clear understanding. And say, yeah, I put it in my backpack, like $1 million object that is now on display at our gallery. Took it back to New Haven, I sent it to the lab, and they came back, they removed few of and they came back with a list of more than 30 or 40 chemicals compressed inside the object. And no one really looked into that crucifix in this particular fashion. Even most of the people who write about intersection between Christianity and Kongo religion, they miss that important, methodological approach to an object that from outside looked, a Christian object, but wasn't. At the end of the way the object function wasn't Christian enough,
Right.
For Congolese mindset. And just giving a sense of.
So interesting. That is so interesting. Yeah, amazing. Thank you. So I don't know. I guess we'll open it up even further if you're able to stay for 10 more minutes or so. I know, Bailey, I don't know again if you have, I know Dagenhard has another question. Amira has multiple questions, and Carly may also have some questions. So I know some people have to go, and please, if you need to go, I fully understand, but if our guests are able to stay, can I ask anybody else who has a question to please? Dagenhard, I don't know if you want to ask your second question. Yes, Lauren, sorry, take off, of course. I know you need to. Isabel, you as well. But please, Dagenhard, if you have your second question, and then followed by Amira, and Bailey, most certainly
Sure.
you as well. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. So this is a question for Bárbaro Martínez-Ruiz, and at the start of your talk, Bárbaro, there was a mention in your own orientations, let's say as a researcher, to strive to produce a blueprint to understand how Kongo people respond to their own traditions. And I was just wondering if you could go into more detail as to how that plays out in the field, let's say, or how that plays out while you're conducting research, and what a blueprint in this sense is, and what it should strive to do.
It's interesting because something we talk with Bedia when we are preparing the presentations and Al about a lecture I think is that no one asks to a practitioner what they think about something, in terms of it's specific in African art history. When people write about it, we have few examples, important examples, but we write as we think the subject doesn't have a way to speak in their own behalf. No, and I decided to kind of complicate a little bit the whole issue when they asked me to do the colloquium at Harvard presentation about art that emerged from Bedia was in that example, from someone who already practiced that religion, who live in that, understand the knowledge and also the epistemology. I don't like to use the word epistemology. I think it's a very expensive word. I like to use principles, but and I like the word as the words and to talk about it. But in this context, I understand the principle of making, but we never ask him directly because we believe that he's translating everything through his art. And what happened is I took a series of artists, Cuban artists from the avant-garde in Cuba from the beginning of the 20th century all the way to the present. And I wanted to explain their work using the conceptual framework that emerged from that practice, like use the concept of mpungu as a methodology, as a procedure to understand, to explain visually what happened in those images. No, that was a problem at the end of my presentation because they thought I was forcing and being too essentializing the Kongo tradition to explain the art of artists who work from that tradition. But I wasn't allowed to use that particular methodological framework to explain them, and that is what, because I thought was a lacking in the field of African art. In the end, the person who ran the program decided to have another person to kind of counter or to teach me I was wrong. So it's pretty much is what happened, by telling me that what we think is African art, it's not important to talk about that voice. It doesn't matter what Bedia think about his own Kongo tradition, because a historical document prove what he understands as a Kongo tradition is not really a Kongo tradition. It's like a perverse understanding of Catholicism from 500 years ago. And it's kind of prevent you to articulate this idea of local knowledge, because that local knowledge is compromised to begin with. No, that is the kind of dilemma I was kind of being drawn into. And the blueprint is, in a way, for me, is to allow that voice to speak for themselves. And in 1967, when they came through, Bunseki Fukiao is a Congolese philosopher. In 1967, he wrote a book about the commerce and trading in the Congo. And Jansen and McGaffey used to be in the Congo at the same time as a Fulbright scholar. And they became later students of Fukiao, and they learned Kikongo from Fukiao. And Johann Fabien was another person who migrated to that place, and Robert Farris Thompson. This is a very important moment in the history of African art. And Jansen decides, Fukiao decided to write another book on different initiations that he used to be part of. And Jansen wrote the introduction to this beautiful text that no more than 5 people know this essay. Books exist, and that particular essay is like 25 pages, in which he brings these important issues that been raised by his friends. Number one, Fukiao wasn't, because he been Christianized, being also a member of a Catholic faith, that compromised his judgment of his own religion. That was the first. Number two, he did his PhD in a Western school. And number three, what he think he know about Kikongo is not real Kikongo. In a way, he kind of removed the authority of Fukiao over his own knowledge, over his own practice, and allow someone like McGaffey to say, I can do it, this is the way to do it. And I think I see this as a symptom that's been happening for many, many years. We're talking about the voice, but we don't recognize how that voice works. We won't be able to honor that commitment. And I think the blueprint is by going back to the beginning and say, there had to be, you quote the people as equal to a famous scholar. You put the full names and family names like any other person. And then you begin by honoring and giving respect in that particular framework of the writing. You're writing as a scholar in a particular context for a particular audience, but they had to begin from that, and their opinion, they had to be transparent and clear. You don't have to agree or disagree with them. They have the right to be to be an equal, footprint with any other person. That was what I was thinking. The blueprint is, I see this as I learning more about myself, and I learning more about my religions by understanding what's happening in both sides of the Atlantic. That is the way that is my logic. My logic is to understand not just the graphic tradition from 19th century. I went back to 7,856 years ago, the rock painting. This is what I try to understand what that means, this particular site, how those meanings being created, and how the people learn over time, because those sites that go back to as far, this is before Bantu migration that took place 2,500 years ago. Those sites still owned by families onto today. There's something we haven't, we just scratched the surface. And I think by understanding a language take over 500 years to become a fully developed, a quick language, and sometimes 1,000 years. And that kind of process I apply into, how long take to an image or a motif or signs or a symbol from 7,000 years ago to become the fully effective vocabulary I know and Bedia know in Cuba, or the one I show from the church. The fluidity that we see right now in those two examples have thousands, hundreds of years behind. And I had to be able to understand the process of transformations and the complexity. That complexity imply conversation with Christianity, imply conversation with other faith and other religion, including modernity. They are not like any other cultural exchange everywhere in the world. And I think the formation of culture is something that is important to me, and it's something I study. It's how you get to that particular point. An idea of but what I try to do is the idea of becoming. It's by analyzing the data, when what they call modern human arrived back to Africa 10,000 years ago, or 9,500 to be more precise. They have something, a series of technology that allow them to understand coming back to Africa and transforming the entire environment. The metalwork, terracotta, domestication of animal, and rock painting art. We do not understand what is the role of art as a technology in the process of transformation of becoming. And the only thing I come into mind is these modern humans understood the idea of becoming. That was important. This idea of becoming human is like an everlasting experience. It's never end. And I think I applied that by going back to as far as 10,000 years ago, 25,000 years ago, try to understand human behavior in different part of Africa, and then go back to the particular case studies that in one hand, I have a particular experience in the other side of the diaspora. And I kind of try to understand that process from my own perspective, or bringing these other voices into conversation. This is what I use, these kind of multi-layer translations. I will be more effective, because those voices they will be equally, present, rather than to make a quote to a fancy scholar that sometimes doesn't have a clue of the specificity of a language, specificity of practice, or building something, what that means, or migration, what that means, migration for the African context. So you just go back to the language, try to understand, someone to explain what that means, migration, and it would be a very different definition of what migration means. But we never occurred to us to ask them, because in somehow their knowledge is not at the same level of value as we are right in front this ivory tower we call academia. But that is a contested paradigm. In this case, I get a lot of bad press and attack by the people who runs the African art program, discipline. Well, I don't care. I'm not asking them for authorization and permissions. I'm moving forward like a tank. I don't know if I answered the questions.
Oh my goodness. I know people are starting to drop off, and I don't want to, I don't know. Amira, did you want to try to just fit in one more of your questions and then we'll close? I also am going to ask if everybody is willing to, if our speakers are willing to have their email addresses shared with all of these participants in case they want to follow up, if that's okay.
Yeah, that was
Jose,
fine.
and it's okay. Okay, and Jose as well, if we share your email. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so Amira, why don't you give us, Bailey, did you have a question? You may say yes or no. It's completely up to you.
I was going to say, I'm also really interested in Amira's question about the livelihood of beings or objects. I'm happy that she brought that up. I don't know what she wants to ask, but I was also interested.
Please, let's do it. Then let's do it. Yeah, yeah.
I just want to have to say that with Mr. Bedia and Mr. Martinez-Ruiz, it's 2 hours will never be enough with both of you. The amazing work that you're doing. But yeah, I was really interested, especially in regard to Mr. Jose's work and installation, how your representation of religious material, culture material, and ceremonies figures on all that, and the representation of the artwork becomes the artwork itself. I'm really intrigued by that. I'm really grappling with those, how we as academics or artists, and as Mr. Martinez brought up, like we become very involved and engaged in that, the work becomes itself a piece of artwork. And so on that note, in the question that I was raising earlier about the livelihood, and again, in a museum space, there's the tendency, the practices to preserve, and this probably preservation conversation that people are having, is to repair objects and to put them in a specific way and in a particular way. And I'm really thinking about how about the idea these objects are not meant to be static, are not meant to live forever. I think part of them being the beings that I'm referring to is them continuing transformation, is the ongoing process of their transformation. And I was wondering what your thoughts are, especially specifically from like an installation point of view, if those beings are meant to break in a museum space, and if that's okay to continue having an exhibition with broken objects or beings, because that's what they're meant to be. They're not meant to be static, but rather continue to shape and reshape history in representation of those ongoing practices, because these practices, they never see to just continue to be, where we have communities continue to take part of those religious and ceremonial practices. So how do we do that? I guess.
Well, it's complicated question, but yeah, but it's the problem is increasing. But at the same time, we can get a more understanding of the level of the thing what we have in front, definitely, in many different layers. But what I know, I've been enjoying the thing for years, and what I try to do is to share this with the other people. In some way, it's sometimes moving, who going back and forth. I remember once an occasion where I was at the Art Museum in Gainesville, in Florida, one of at the main opening of the show, Kongo Across the Water, and I received a big compliment from an artist from Kinshasa who was joining the group. His name is Steve Bangoma, and he's a guy who came from Kinshasa, and he said, "I am so honored to be here with one of my major inspirations, Jose Bedia." I said, "What? You're supposed to be the inspiration to me." I said, no, I pay big respect your work. I've been following your work for years, and this. So in some way, all these things moving back and forth. So we are able to add new element of this dialogue. The thing for me was, he said, I pay respect for me, I pay respect for him as well, as a representation of the Congo culture from Kinshasa. This young man came there and he told me something that in some way proved me that I was in the right step, because he recognized some kind of link with my work. You know, for me, this is what like an award. I received that day. I received an award, not because he said that in public, because he put me in the same level of him. Mm-hmm. And this is something what is amazing when the people come together and this talking about the same problematic, the same cultural movement and things. Yeah, this is something we have to do. We have a long way to walk. Yeah.
Thank you.
And also what I can add is the idea of broken is very important in the Congo practice. I think it's that every religious object is produced in the Congo, in Angola, or Congo Kinshasa, or the Popular Republic of Congo, is made out of objects already have a history. They have an imprint from life before the person. And or you have the shell that is twisted, or you have the root from the tree. It is the nature have already a present. It prints something on that object. It's important Congo concept. And this idea of incompletions is part of the aesthetic and the conceptual framework of a Congo that go back into generosity. The idea of generosity that is Bedia was, talking about what he practiced is one of the key ethical elements of a Congo traditions that go on and honor someone from the tradition. And by the way, that process happened in a reverse way. You can, I say to all, I always say the most important artist, Cuban artist in the last 150 years, it was José Bedia. And not just
what? Let me out of here. No,
no, because
responsibility.
Yeah, but because it's not about who is famous, it's about contributions, and it's how you measure that the contribution, and also the contribution go in both directions. If you want to read his contribution in relation to Western art and critical theory, it's easy to do it. Also, the difficult one is to do the contribution in his own cultural experience. And that dual contribution, I only can maybe refer to one other artist at the level of mastery, in my opinion. But I don't need to ask anyone what they think. I just tell him everywhere I go, this is the reason why this artist and this particular work is critical for us to understand things we are, not able to explain, or we are avoiding to explain it. And I don't have a problem with that. And I do it in public, but I've been doing a couple times in public when Bedia been there, just to tell him this what I think about it. I don't have a problem with that. And I just want to go on record again in front of him. This is what I think, and I will do it again and again.
Thank you.
Listen, I want to just throw in a word here to say that we feel the same way about Jose and Bárbaro, and I do feel as though we need to let them go, because this is a wonderful, late morning here for us in California. You guys are somewhere else in other time zones. And
8:24. Yeah, I had to take care of the baby now.
Yeah, honestly, this has been such a wonderful opportunity, and I hope we can do it again. And I wish that the people that had to leave early could have heard all the comments, including the last one. I mean, honestly, the sort of mutual respect and generosity that's going in all directions here is just exemplary. So I just want to thank our guests really sincerely, and hope that this is the beginning of a conversation I thought of all sorts of trips I would like to take with both of our guests. I literally wrote down an idea for a trip to Eastern Senegal to visit these communities that make masquerades that very few people know about.
The Diola, you want to be with the Diola people?
They're kind of more sort of into Senegal, but
okay.
Really,
we're
cool.
invited. That would be great.
Yeah, no, we'll all go together. COVID permitting. Anyway, I just wanted to say my own thanks, and I know that Ellen will want to sort of wrap things up here, but I'm just grateful that everybody could come along, starting with you two gentlemen.
Yeah, no, I just echo really what Al said. I'm so grateful to both of our guests and to Al for agreeing to step in and moderate. And this has just been amazing. I will take this recording and of course share it with all of our smaller group so that people will be able to hear their final remarks after they needed to leave. But I will share your email addresses, because I think you had a very intellectually inspired group of people here on our final conversation who will want to continue to, myself included, frankly, will want to engage about these ongoing topics. So really, we can't thank you enough. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Take
much.
care. Have good evenings.
Oye, Bárbaro, después te llamo.
Okay, perfecto.
Bye.
Okay, bye.